What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are here with a quick intro before what is just a 5-person dance party podcast in which we will be redrafting the last 20 number one picks by their peak seasons. So we'll get into a little bit more of the guidelines when we're actually doing it. But essentially, every draft, first round draft pick, drafted number one is eligible. We can only pick one of their seasons. So we're drafting a specific season for each player. Each player can only, of course, be used once. There'll be more about the criteria there. We will be joined by, and they will intro themselves soon, Bryan Toporek from Forbes, Bleacher Report, Liberty Ballers, the NBA podcast. You know him well around these parts. But two very special guests in Bleacher Report, multi-platform editors. Grant and I have worked with them forever. Joey Akeley and Jay Dunbar. They will introduce themselves, give you a little bit about their background before we get started. We have already done it, though. So we're recording this intro after doing it. It was fun. Grant, what did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I'm excited for people to get to see it slash hear it. It was difficult in like the best way because, you know, how do you decide how much better season X is than season Y? And we'll get, again, you said we'll get into the criteria, but like we're factoring in playoff success in some of these seasons too, which in several cases there is none because a lot of these guys did not make the playoffs in their best seasons. So really exciting, really fun, awesome to just have a full room of a lot of people that really enjoy basketball and are competitive and are trying to, however you win the draft, we're all trying to win this draft.
Without further delay, though, let's get to redrafting the last 20 number one picks. What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you not only with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, but 3 other superstars as we go into this redrafting the last 20 number one picks project that is super fun, not at all controversial. We can't wait to get to it. But you've recognized probably one of these faces. 2 of them have not been on the podcast before, so we're excited they're finally here. So I'd just like to let everyone introduce themselves a little bit and tell you their names. Jay Dunbar, would you like to go first, please?
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me. Obviously you said it. I'm Jay Dunbar. I have worked at BR for the last, decade. I wear a number of hats. I am mostly an editor, part-time writer, and, jack of all trades basically at BR. And I've worked with all of you here in this room for a long time. So it's fun to actually get to be on this with you finally, because I'm a big fan.
Joey, would you like to let our listeners and viewers know how much of a superstar you are as well?
I've been working at Bleacher Report since 2012, so I predate Jay and Bryan, and I'm not sure about Grant and Dan, but
I'm 2011, so
wow, I'm stuck. Wow, you win the game. Okay, but yeah, I've been editing Dan and Grant for like a decade, and yeah, they're like 2 of the worst writers we've ever had. No, they're actually 2 of the best, and yeah. Jay's explanation for what I do is very similar. Like it's, mainly an editor, but been writing recently, doing some assignment editing. I'm doing I'm like the Olympics editor for this upcoming Olympics. So that's a really big opportunity for me. And I'm really excited about that. So yeah, pretty much though, I'm mainly just an editor, just like Jay and Bryan.
Bryan, would you like to let people know who you are, even though they might know already?
Yes. Hello again. Thank you guys for having us as always. And thank you for facilitating this draft. It was a very fun project, the brainchild of Joey and Jay. So shouts to both of them for getting this thing off the ground. Just like Joey and Jay, the 3 of us are a dynamic 3-man team that kind of keeps everything from catching on fire behind the scenes, or we do our best to make sure we don't have any major crises behind the scenes. And yeah, you can also find me at Forbes Sports, where I cover CBA stuff and some Sixers coverage, and Liberty Ballers, where I do some Sixers stuff as well, which begrudgingly becomes relevant later in this episode.
So this exercise is just snake drafting every number one NBA draft pick since 2004. That leaves us 1 year short of LeBron James, but that's intentional because we wanted to make this exercise not so obvious. So it'll start with Dwight Howard in 2004. And the idea is to draft the best player available from 1 to 20. And we're going on years that actually happened. So that means Wemby only has 1 year. We're trying to get each guy's peak year. So the spirit of this thing is to get each guy at their best. So if, Wemby's got his rookie year and we're going to also use playoffs as like a tiebreaker. So we're going to include playoffs despite the fact that not everybody is going to have playoffs during the year in question, because it just makes it a little bit more fun. Because like I said, the spirit of this thing is to get these guys at their best. So with that, we're not trying to build a coherent team. I think I already said that, but we're just trying to get the best player available, and we are doing it snake draft form because it's more fun that way. And we're just trying to have fun with this thing. With that, I think Grant has the number 1 pick.
That's right. Thanks,
It's rigged. It's rigged.
No, I was gonna start this with a complaint because I think there's maybe 5 guys that I really like with this pick, and that means I'm not getting one of the other ones. So we should have discussed pre-draft trades beforehand so I could trade it down. But I will just suck it up and deal with it. I think I have to go Anthony Davis, the number 1 pick in 2012. And his season we're using here is 2017-18. That is definitely, it's debatable if that's his best season. I do think there's a strong case for it because it's his highest MVP finish. He was 3rd in MVP voting that year, all NBA first team, all defensive first team, 3rd in DPOY. So, that's a monster year, 28-11, 2.6 blocks led the league. Actually shot a few threes that year. 2.2 was his career high per game in attempts to that point, made 34%. Like this isn't like the bubble Anthony Davis that had so much more bulk and was hitting jumpers, but this is like peak young athletic Anthony Davis. It's his age 24 season. So I just can't leave him there. I know I'm giving up on someone that actually won MVP in the season we're using, but I think AD has to be my number 1.
Well, we got Joey on the clock with a 2nd pick. I mean, I think AD was a fairly obvious number 1 pick to me, although maybe you guys disagree, but see what Joey has at number 2.
I'm passing on an MVP as well. It was very difficult to choose between Derrick Rose and Dwight Howard, but I'm taking Dwight Howard. He finished first team All-NBA 5 years in a row, but that doesn't actually help him here because I got to choose just one season. And the main argument, obviously, for Derrick Rose is he won MVP and Dwight Howard did not win MVP. But in 2008, 2009, Dwight finished 4th in the MVP voting, but also led his team to the finals. He had 40 points in a conference finals closeout game against the Cavaliers. Meanwhile, Derrick Rose kind of struggled in that 2011 playoffs when he was the MVP. So because this is so close and we were able to use playoffs as a tiebreaker, I think the fact that Dwight was more effective in those playoffs and also led his team deeper in those playoffs, I think that's why I give him the nod here.
Cool. Next, we have Bryan at number 3.
All right. Well, Joey made my decision pretty easy. Honestly, not. There's one other guy I was strongly considering with this pick, but I think the playoffs are also perhaps the tiebreaker for me here. So I will go with Derrick Rose at number 3, taking the MVP year, obviously, in 2010, 2011. Averaged 25 points, nearly 8 assists, 4 rebounds per game. Shooting percentages weren't all that great, but the Bulls were a monster that year, 62-20, made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. So, you can pick nits at the Derrick Rose MVP year and whether it was one of the weaker in recent memory. I would certainly argue that it was, but with that said, still, pre-ACL tear, Derrick Rose was a phenom, and I am very happy to be getting him at number 3.
Can I ask, are you? Like, I know you mentioned
ethically, no.
But even functionally, I just maybe I'm actually kind of shocked at who's still left on the board here relative to how I built my big board. Is like, did you all have Joey? Where did you had already mentioned that you kind of had Derrick Rose? It seems like in your top 3. Grant, was MVP Derrick Rose in your top 3 as well?
For sure.
Wow. All right.
Why do you hate Derrick Rose, Dan?
Well, there are a litany of reasons, but I actually think that's probably the most overrated MVP campaign that we've seen of the modern era. So I'm a little bit surprised that he was that high, but that makes me think that I'm doing something wrong in my approach to this.
Well, here's the thing. Like, maybe you're just like actually right and we're all wrong. The problem for me is that like the next player who might be picked, it might be Kyrie. I don't know. And he's never been first team All NBA. So you're taking a guy who never was first team All NBA over a guy who won MVP. That's tough to do. That's all.
I won't spoil who the other guy is that I was considering because I'm going to hope he falls back to me at 6. Dan, I hope you enjoy Anthony Bennett here at number 4.
So for everyone's benefit, we're taking these guys at their peak, and so we're not considering, all of the things that came after MVP Derrick Rose. But Dan, you'll get a chance to tell us who you would have taken over D Rose now because you're up next with the back-to-back picks.
Yeah, I would have taken quite a few people over Derrick Rose. I'm going to go with 2000. This is maybe it's recency bias here. I'm going with 2023, 2024 Anthony Edwards. There was like, he doesn't have the same kind of play style, but the way the Wolves offense was run, like he was a central force in the same way that James Harden was, while also being all defense worthy. He doesn't make it. I know he doesn't finish in the upper echelon of the All NBA actual discussion, but when you're weighing that against what, let's say, Derrick Rose did in 2010, 2011, I think that just says more about the state of the game right now, where I view it as harder, as better, the competition they're facing. We can also look at, if we were using tiebreakers, which this actually wasn't really a difficult decision for me, so it wasn't, but he has monster moments in the playoffs. And so having him here, maybe I'm sipping too much of the Anthony Edwards sauce at this point, but the progression he made as a passer, continues to make as an on-ball defender, and even just, you wish the jumper was, I don't know, like 10% better or something, but to still have that off the dribble work from the perimeter in his arsenal, he was like comfortably in the top 5 for me. And so, yeah, I'm taking him with my 3rd pick, and I actually feel really good about it.
Well, I kind of love that, but you also have the next pick. So tell us who else you have taken over D Rose.
I mean, I think we're about to see like recency bias city here. Also, it's me trying to update our actual results as I'm talking is so bad. I'm going with more recency bias here. Who's the last rookie that came into the league and was probably just a top 15 player? If we're being honest, like by the end of the season, wire to wire, does Victor Wembanyama in 23-24 deserve to make All NBA? Probably not. But Grant and I, when we did our All NBA selections, I know when Bryan did it with Mort, he was mentioned. Like, this is someone who came in, and if we believe that the game is at its peak in terms of talent, and this is someone who, one, made first team all defense, which a rookie has never done before, and also by the end of the season had a pull-up three-pointer because the Spurs like kind of discovered how to use him at the 5, and that opened up a ton of room for him. If he would have started this season where he ended it, looking at the lineups he played in and how the Spurs were using him, he's probably making an All-NBA team as a rookie. And the fact that even if you think this is not enough offense from him, like in this spot to put him above these other guys, he had a case to win Defensive Player of the Year. Like, he just came in and had a case to win Defensive Player of the Year. So this, again, was not a hard decision for me. I did consider Zion a little bit. I feel like we kind of, because he's been so intermittently available, we forget how much peak Zion is just dominant, like he was in 2020, 2021 when he played in 60-something games. That was fucking cool. But give me Wemby and Anthony Edwards here. Then the fact that I'm picking, I didn't think one of these guys was going to be available in this spot. So the fact that they're both, it makes me happy, but it's probably a terrible look to see that, did we really just go with 2 this past season players here? But I also don't care.
I'll just remind people that Zion and Kyrie are still on the board. It gets pretty bleak, down the end of this list, but up here, I think like it's pretty fun to be able to snag and Wemby 4 and 5 in this draft. So it's kind of just a fun grouping up top here. So Bryan's up next.
Disgusted.
I mean, I had Wemby a little lower down, so I'm actually really happy with. I'm about to have the 7th pick here after Bryan, and I'm getting someone who is higher on the board. So thank you.
Yeah, I would like to extend that. And Grant, I just want to ask a question. I know you guys have been hosting this podcast for a while, but how does it feel that Dan has not watched the NBA before this season? Is that a weird?
Dan's pick sponsored by I don't know, Prisoner of the Moment International. It's a charity that
season 2 of Severance. Is he just severed?
Yeah, have you been severed, Dan?
I have seen every game of the 2024 NBA Finals matchup between the Bucks and Thunder, so I have no idea.
I did think pretty hard about Wemby, I will admit, just because you want to be on the right side of history. But I don't know. I respect it, Dan. I like the zag.
I do too. I had those guys in my top 10, but I had I mean, now I can spoil it because they are off the board. I had Edwards 9th and Wemby 10th. So maybe I'm leaning too far into the past, but I did not expect Kyrie to be here at 6. You know, it is hard to pick his quote unquote peak season. And so I'm going with 2018, 2019. That's the only time he was second team All NBA. He's made third team twice. Wasn't his best in terms of scoring. That was more of his Brooklyn days, but did have a career high 6.9 assists in this season. Shot almost 49 from the field, 40.1 from 3, 87.3 from the line. So almost a 50-40-90 year from him. Obviously did not end well for him. This is his final year in Boston, and we don't need to rehash that. But you know, again, we're not taking any off-court stuff into account here. So maybe I'm just going to draft the most problematic team in this redraft. But we'll go with team canceled, and we're taking Kyrie at number 6.
I was gonna say, as an unapologetic Celtics fan, I do not approve of your selections, but to each his own.
Was that the only year too? I'm trying to think of just like where Kyrie had an actual case to be a top 10 player in the league. Like that's kind of, I don't remember discussing him in that vein really in any other season. We can talk like what he did during the NBA finals and hit that big shot, but he's very rarely been in like, top 10 player territory. And I feel like that season was the one where we just all agreed, and that would back it up with second team All NBA that, Kyrie was a top 10 player that year.
Yeah. I mean, he's just been like the Robin to someone's Batman for most of his career, whether LeBron, KD, now Luka. So, you know, his time in Boston, since Tatum and Jaylen Brown were still young, that was his one chance to really be the Batman. And again, you know, maybe he's better off as a Robin, as we've seen, especially over the past year and with his time with LeBron. So like taking this as his peak counts statistically for his peak, but I think he is better off as a number 2.
For sure. Agreed. Joe, you're up next.
I think this pick comes down to Blake Griffin, Karl-Anthony Towns, or Zion Williamson. And Blake Griffin's the only one of them who has finished second team All NBA, and he did in the 2013-14 season. So I'm going to honor that. I'm going to take Blake Griffin. Zion is such a tough call here. Even in Zion's peak season, he got injured at the end of the year. In his 2 best seasons, he's got injured at the end of the year. So how do you like really account for that in this? You know, it's so hard, but I feel like I need to at least sort of make that part of the discussion. And so that puts him down a little bit. So yeah, Blake in his 2013-14 season, he finished 3rd in MVP, 24 points per game, 9.5 rebounds, shot over 50%. And at that time, there were, you know, teams weren't shooting a zillion threes quite yet. So the fact that Blake could like hit 18 footers just like on automatic was huge for that Clippers offense. They were able to, you know, throw lobs to DeAndre Jordan and to Blake. And then on top of that, just he could hit that jumper. It was so at that point he was like stretching the floor. So yeah, I'm taking Blake, and obviously he was still in his athletic peak, and he, you know, every game it seemed like he was going to dunk on somebody. So it was one of the most exciting players I've ever seen. So that helps a little bit in this.
Did you consider, because I know you considered other seasons, did you consider, this wasn't peak athletic Blake, but what was the year it was like 2018, 2019, where he kind of goes bonkers. He makes 3rd team All NBA with them, and he hits like he has a pull-up 3-pointer in the arsenal. His playmaking kind of. Did you consider that type of year at all, or no? It was just like 13, 14 kind of won it out easily for you.
You know, the problem was like those Pistons teams were just not very good, and I just want, you know, my head was just immediately like I need to pick a year where they had like a really competitive team. But obviously he hit 2.5 3-pointers per game in 2018-19. So like for today's game, he was a better player then, I mean, which makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think it's close, but I still think I would take the 13-14 season.
Lob City Blake over John Wall still on the board. Cat still on the board. We'll see what Grant does on the turn.
Wemby and Ant really threw a wrench in here, but that I think allowed a couple guys to fall to me that I did not think I would have a shot at. So the first, and thank God this is not a real team, because these next 2 picks will really definitively test the idea of do you need shooting to succeed. So I'm going John Wall, and I'm going to use the 2016-17 season. That is, to me, pretty clearly his best year. There are some other candidates, but he was 7th in MVP voting that year. That's by far his highest finish. I think it's probably his only top 10 finish. And the bonus there too is, in addition to that, he was also third team All NBA. He was an All-Star. I'm getting a little bit of playoff bump here because of the players remaining. It looks like he had if you're going by VORP, the most impactful postseason of anybody that's left on the board. So, I mean, that's still a modest. I mean, the Wizards that year played 13 playoff games as I'm looking at the sheet. So it's not like they were bumping up against the finals, but that's
that might
just
be
a
a franchise high. No, 13 playoff games
could be.
No?
Yeah. I don't remember offhand. I wonder if is that the year that they wore black against the Celtics or something, or the Celtics wore black against them because it was somebody's funeral. That feels like it's buried in my memory somewhere. So I got to go John Wall there. And then Zion he's been on the board too long. I have to take him. The season here is the 2021 year, which I'm sure that when writing about Zion that year, 50 different times I cited how infrequently someone had averaged 27 a game on over 60% shooting. So that's going to be burned in my brain forever. This, again, glad this isn't a real team because nobody on it can shoot because I have Zion and John Wall. But man, are we athletic. So that's fun if we imagine it through that lens. Feel good about it, though. I'm glad I got Zion. I didn't think I was getting Wall on the turn here. So 60% of the roster complete. And actually, I considered the playoff side of it. So I'm pretty satisfied.
Grant with AD, Wall, and Williamson. Not a bad squad if it were a real team. We have Joey up next at number 10.
Yeah, I didn't think that John Wall would be taken. So I had him at 10 and I had Cat at 8. So I'm taking Cat and saying that Grant blew it is what I'm saying. Cat is just like, there's a lot of, there's like a negative like perception of him. I don't know, for some reason. I think the whole Minnesota Timberwolves team is just like kind of disliked other than Anthony Edwards for whatever reason. But I think maybe people sort of forget just how amazing Cat was. I mean, in 2017-18, 54% shooting, 42% from 3, 12.3 rebounds per game, 1.4 blocks per game. I mean, he was doing it all. And then, a few years later, they trade for Rudy Gobert, and he has to play a position that he probably shouldn't be playing. I mean, I think he would be best as a stretch 5. And he's still putting up big numbers. He was an all-star this year. Anyway, I'm getting carried away because we're supposed to talk just about the peak season. And yeah, I think that peak season for Cat in 2018-19 was another really good season for him. We had both as options for here, and I think they were both very similar seasons. So yeah, I'll just say Cat's 27-18 season, for the sake of argument, was just a little better. But yeah, I'm taking him and really happy that I got him over John Wall.
Well, it's a good thing we're not doing full squads because you have a loaded front court right now with Dwight, Blake, and Cat.
You
So,
just moved Pat to the 3 after talking about how good he was at the stretch 5. Small forward.
Blake's basically a point guard, or he was in Detroit. So there's that.
yeah, there we go. Point
Not
forward.
this version of Blake Griffin. 2013-14 Blake Griffin running point might be awkward.
Well, Brian, the pickings are getting slimmer and slimmer, so you're up at 11.
I hate you guys. I hate you guys so much.
Do it, Brian. You have to do it.
I know I do. But I really hate all of you for making me do it. So for those of you who don't know, I cover the Sixers and have covered the Sixers for a long time throughout multiple star trade demands and requests and hostage situations. And I think I'm going to have to take one of the guys who submarined an entire offseason, that being Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm going to report all of you to HR after this.
All is right with
I
the
think I'm
world.
going the 2019-20 season, he was third team All-NBA, first team All-Defense, fourth in DPOY voting, and All-Star as well. Led the league with 2.1 steals per game. Believe this is the year, yes, this is the year he hit his first three-pointer, his first career. So that's exciting. This was, I have to refresh everyone's memory because Ben Simmons is now such a joke, but like 2019-20, this is before the back injury started, or it kind of started right around the bubble is when, he missed the playoffs that year and has been basically downhill ever since. But like back then we were still in, off-season workout videos might actually mean something. Look at Ben Simmons shooting all these threes. Maybe he's going to finally learn to shoot. And imagine what could happen then. But I mean, a 6'10" defender is a nightly triple-double. And hey, maybe in this alternate universe, he doesn't break his back and demand a trade from my team. And maybe he does learn to shoot. So I'm begrudgingly taking Ben Simmons at 11, but I hate all of you for it.
I'm so happy it played out this way.
I knew I did my rankings and I had Ben Simmons at 11. I'm like, there's such a clear top 10 and there's such a clear drop off after number 10 that I either have to go against my rankings or I have to take this guy, and I'm disgusted either way.
Well, if anything, if there's justice in this world, Fultz will follow to you too, and we can we can round this thing out.
Great, can't wait.
We have Dan at the turn again.
So I have back-to-back picks, and I'll just post them at the same time, and I guess there'd be a differentiator as to why my squad is going to look so bad. Well, not that it's a squad, but my picks are going to look absolutely like I haven't watched basketball since before this season. I was almost hoping that BT wouldn't take Simmons so that my draft could look a little bit more like, he didn't just draft this past season. But I have to go with, I'm going to take Paolo Banchero from 23-24 first, and then Cade Cunningham right after him. And so, I don't really feel bad about it, but the optics of it, I do feel like are absolutely terrible. Paolo, I think, gets a lot of shit because he's been relatively inefficient when you're looking at his true shooting percentage overall. A lot of that just has to do with the Magic spacing. The fact that he's as good as he is and already made an all-star team in that, and I won't even say spacing, but around that supporting cast with a lack of shooting. This is someone who's been able to score in a lot of different ways. There's a balletic brutality to the way he plays where he blends both force and finesse. He can score at every level now. I believe in the step back jumper, even though it's not falling at a super high clip. He's someone who could be the fringe engine of your offense at this point too. And I think he's been, I don't know how you guys feel, I'll actually throw this to the room. He's been a lot better defensively through his first 2 seasons than I ever thought he was going to be when just looking at him coming into the draft.
Either that or the fact that Orlando has 6 really good defenders is making it a little easier on him. But
who's available in Orlando? Jonathan Isaac plays every third week for 15 minutes or whatever it is. Wendell Carter Jr. is injured all the time. So it helps that Franz can guard the wings. But so that's why I picked Paolo over Cade, who's also, I'm choosing his 23-24 season. There was questions about him at the beginning of this past year because he was a turnover machine. The Pistons looked awful, but they started to open up the floor a little bit for him. The turnovers fell. And I think the biggest progression I saw is that when you give him actual space, he can make more complex decisions with the ball. And I am a big believer in him as a scorer. I know he doesn't have necessarily that blow by detonation to where he's going to be able to get by people or create separation against everyone, even if he is getting to his pull up. He shot 43% on step back threes during this season. And so that is arguably the single most important shot, skill shot in basketball right now. We all know that wide open layups are technically more efficient. So the fact that he can hit that is why I almost picked him above Paolo, just because I think that he has made strides as a scorer. But I make no apologies for having 4 picks B from this past season because I think they were all spectacular. And sometimes that's just where the chips fall. But I'm excited to see what the BR app users think about this when they see how many consecutive guys went to one person in the 23-24 season.
You are crushing the 12 to 17-year-old demographic right now. You dominated it.
Maybe I'm ingratiating myself into Bleacher Report's main audience. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah, you gamed it.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Bryan, let's see if you can live up to Dan's pandering. You're up next at 14.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anyone left whose peak season happened last year. I don't want to take away from Dan.
Please take Fultz. That would just be the most hilarious outcome of you having to take Simmons and Fultz.
I'm gonna save Fultz just in case he falls to 19. At number 14, I'm gonna take the guy that I had above Paolo and Cade, actually. That being DeAndre Ayton.
Oh,
dominating,
wow.
as it were. Look, I mean, he is not as versatile as either one of those, Paolo or Cade. So it was a tough call between those guys. And, moving forward, I'm obviously taking Paolo for sure ahead of Ayton, would probably take Cade ahead of Ayton, but we're just talking about peak seasons here. Ayton has had the advantage of being in the league longer to draw from more peak seasons. He also got to play with an elite point guard in Chris Paul when he was back in Phoenix, and that helped him have a couple monster seasons, the one where they got to the finals, and the year after, they weren't as successful during the playoffs, but Ayton had what I would argue is his best season in 21-22, averaged 17 and 10, shot a career high 63.4% from the field, 36.8% from 3-point range as well. We won't talk about the volume. We'll pretend he shot like Brooke Lopez or Miles Turner, and that wasn't only 19 3-point attempts in the regular season, but he knocked down 7. So between him and Ben Simmons, I'm doing great. Got 9 whole 3-pointers from my front court right now. Also averaged almost 18 and 9 during the playoffs. Again, they didn't make it to the finals that year, but has proven that he is at least not a total, Jonas Valanciunas needs to just go get hidden or disappear once the playoffs roll around. So I'm pretty happy with Ayton here at 14. And if we were assembling hypothetical teams, being able to pair Ayton with Derrick Rose and Kyrie Irving could actually be a ton of fun. Although, yeah, my team also can't exactly shoot very well. So
they would both.
That's funny.
Your 2 point guards would both have more dunks than your primary center, too.
And free throw attempts for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, I feel like we're getting down to the point. If we're all standing on a playground, the guys left are starting to get nervous because we have 6 picks left. So Joey is up at number 15.
I'm taking Andrew Bogut. Bryan,
damn it!
I just have to say, Bryan, that Andrew Bogut is a way better player than DeAndre Ayton. Better passer, better rebounder, much better defender. And in the peak season I'm taking from him, he averaged 15.9 points and 10.2 rebounds. So he's almost the same caliber of scorer. So I think you made a mistake. I considered Wiggins too. I mean, and I'm sure Grant, as a Warriors fan, will take him in the next 2 picks because of that great playoff run. But I think just Bogut's just a better tier of player. He was 13 All NBA in the season we're taking from him in 2010. So that's my pick.
So great pick. I had the goddamn it queued up for either of the 2 Andrews that I assumed you were going to take. I am happy though. Also, by the way, that Bogut season, Joey, was at the end of that year is when that gruesome elbow injury happens. That when he gets undercut on the dunk, and that completely changes his career. I love Andrew Bogut as a basketball player. He was so good.
Good qualifier.
So underrated as a passer. Such a smart defender. Great pick. I love it. I'm really bummed to see him off the board. I am taking Andrew Wiggins with my first of 2 picks here. And 21-22 is without doubt peak Andrew Wiggins. It's the best year of his career. He shot 39% from 3. You could make a very strong case he was the second best player on a team that won the title during the postseason run they were on. Guarded Luka Doncic better than anyone maybe before or since in terms of individually. Guarded Jason Tatum incredibly well in the finals. Suddenly decided he could offensive rebound in the finals, which was a huge swinging factor in that series. I am ecstatic to get Andrew Wiggins. Now we are at the bottom 4, and there was a clear bottom 4 in this draft. And I am totally torn on what to do with this. I should have prepared and just decided which of these 4 I could stomach having on my team. So I guess I gotta go. Am I really going to do this?
Don't take Fultz.
Fultz is not a consideration.
Right.
Think about Anthony Bennett's scouting report around the NBA draft.
So here's my issue, and I can just it doesn't matter because I don't have another pick after this. I want to take Greg Oden. Greg Oden played 21 games in the year that we are considering here, and that is not a lot of games. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. In an 82, it's like roughly
isn't that
20.
Embiid territory, Bryan?
Hey, hey.
I mean,
You played
the other
39
thing
this
is
year.
you've got a season right before that, 08-09 for Greg Oden, where he played 61 games. And the numbers were kind of comparable, but this is just all right. I have to take Greg Oden. I'm going to take Greg Oden. His 9-10 season, again, barely played, averaged 11 and 8, blocked over 2 shots a game, and that's in a season where he's playing a whopping 23.9 minutes per game. So that's some decent rim protection there. I hate this pick. But I hate it less than any of the other 3 guys I had to choose from. So there we are.
I can respect that. I mean, like I said, we're kind of looking at the platonic ideals of these players. So Oden, those 21 games, it's better than probably what we're looking at for the next 3 guys. So Joey, I don't envy you. You're up at number 18.
Can I ask a question though? Who's the bigger what if? Is it Greg Oden? Is it Bogut post elbow injury? Is it what if Simmons never has that moment in that Atlanta Hawks series and just completely breaks? I know this goes beyond their individual seasons, but who's like of those guys? Is Anthony Bennett the biggest what if he just ended up in the right spot? Maybe he'd be a star right now. I'm just preemptively getting my justification behind my pick.
I don't think Bogut belongs in that because Bogut was never going to have like a all NBA first team ceiling. I think like Simmons maybe would have or got fairly close relative to the other guys. And then Oden is just like, who knows, right? That was just the injuries were he missed his first season to injury, never plays like 100 games career. And that's spread across a bunch of years and like a 3-year hiatus. I mean, the fact that he went ahead of Kevin Durant in that draft, I mean, that speaks to some ceiling, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
the galaxy brain cake might be Zion is the bigger what if. Which is like, what if he just stays healthy and can play in the playoffs type deal? But
what about Derrick Rose?
Yeah.
Maybe we're just too far removed from it, or there's off court stuff that's just coloring it for me. But I can't believe he went in the top 3.
Bryan, as someone that watched more Fultz than anyone else here, did you see flashes from Fultz ever where it was like, oh, now I understand? Or was it just because of the shoulder thing, you never even saw any of that?
Yeah, the shoulder thing just totally, you never saw it.
Can you pick one of his Washington seasons? Would that have been like, could we?
I have to get it in. I will remind people that the Sixers traded that pick for essentially what was Jason Tatum in that draft. So that just kind of makes it even worse, especially these days with the Celtics doing what they're doing. So sorry, Bryan, I had to get that in there.
As a future first-round pick, which someone, I think I saw this correctly on Twitter yesterday, they eventually somehow turned that stuff into, I think because they took Romeo Langford with that pick, and I believe they used Romeo Langford in the deal for Derek White. So it's just that trade is the gift that keeps on giving.
It's good that both the 2 interdivision rivals, the Nets and the Sixers, really helped the Celtics build this championship core.
Yeah, really, really great.
100%.
The Bucks too. Good job by the Bucks. Great moves there.
All hail Brad Stevens.
Going to the Oden Simmons debate, I would take Oden as the bigger what if because we just never even got to see it. I mean, we got to see it with Simmons, and I think even if he stayed healthy, it's pretty clear he was going to plateau unless he learned how to shoot, and he's just never going to learn how to shoot. So Oden, I would have at least liked to see what the ceiling is on him. I mean, Simmons can top out at all-star fringe all-NBA guy, but I think we've already seen the best of him, even if he were to stay healthy moving forward.
Fair enough. We have Joey up at number 18.
I thought maybe Grant would take Markelle Fultz, and I had written down this if I had to choose between Bargnani and Oden. I'd rather have 21 games of Greg Oden than 66 games of Andrea Bargnani's inefficient scoring and terrible defense. So then you took Oden. I think that's a totally fair pick. I'm going to take Markelle Fultz, obviously, for the reasons I just said. I just think that Bargnani kills you. Even though he scored, 20 points per game or whatever, Markelle Fultz, you can play him as like your backup point guard and be fine. And maybe like he'll be a neutral situation where you don't get outscored. They don't outscore you. I think anytime you play Bargnani, you're going to get killed because you just can't defend. So yeah, so that's my pick. I might get roasted for it, but I'm sticking to it.
Well, I mean, we're at the bottom of the barrel here, so we're just splitting hairs. Bryan, you have your choice between Bargnani and Anthony Bennett.
It's really tough, guys. But Joey, thank you for falling on the Markelle Fultz grenade. Ben Simmons is painful enough for me. So thank you for sparing me from that. I mean, fun fact, so I put together a spreadsheet of the peak seasons for all of these guys and included, all their per game stats and then a couple of advanced stats as well. So only 2 of these guys have a negative box plus minus in their career best year, that being Bargnani and Anthony Bennett. So good on us for pushing them to 19 and 20 respectively. Bargnani was a minus 1.4 in BPM that year, which was 2010-11. That's the year they averaged 21 points per game. Anthony Bennett was a minus 3.9. So that's not great. And he averaged 5.2 points per game in his quote unquote peak year, which is really just splitting hairs because he did not have a peak year. He just sucked the entire time. So I'm taking Bargnani. I will live with the defensive trade-offs. And I'll realize actually, like, as I was putting together these stats, it made me realize, like, you know what? Maybe Bargnani was just born 10 years too early. And maybe he would be like kind of good in today's NBA. Not like starting caliber, 35 minutes per game, 9-figure contract good, but like, you telling me he couldn't be a stretch 5 off the bench for 15 minutes a game? So let's go. We're going to settle, just because we're not getting number 1 overall pick production out of him. We're pretty happy with stretch 5 Andrea Bargnani here at number 19.
What would be like the reduced version of a unicorn, like not like a mini pony, but like a mini unicorn or something?
Pegasus, I guess Pegasus is bigger.
I do know the names. I know the names of several My Little Pony characters. You got Applejack. You got actually that might be the only one. Bryan, can I pitch you on a tweak? You might want to take 0809 for Bargnani instead of 1011.
Okay.
You get 40% from 3 in 0809. You get 78 games. You get a 25th place finish and most improved player. I mean, that's like, I didn't know that far down, by the way. And it is his least bad box plus minus, if that is persuasive to you at all.
Okay. I was swayed by, this was just by far his highest volume scoring season, but
yeah,
I'm open to find the least bad Andrea Bargnani season that we can.
Well, this is, I was going to say, please extol us on the virtues of Anthony Bennett, Dan.
I stuck with gospel. What was listed on the doc was 14-15 of Anthony Bennett. I'm almost wondering, would it be better to go with 16-17 Anthony Bennett just because, or even 15-16 just because he plays in fewer games and that's how you help your team at that point? So, but yeah, I mean, 2014-2015 is probably his best individual season. He shot a whopping 43.1% on 2-pointers, the second highest mark of his career. He made 7 3-pointers, which is the second lowest of his career. He just, sucks having the last pick, but at least it sucks that he wasn't in the NBA this year because I just would have picked 23-24 Anthony Bennett to just kind of round out the whole this past season crew that I have going on here. But I kind of figured I was going to end up with him. So probably, we're not looking at this right now, but has to be one of the 2 or 3 biggest busts when you look at number 1 picks in NBA history. Like there's Kwame Brown's up there, Michael Okondi, I guess, but like, I don't know, Anthony, but and do you guys give any leeway because that draft in 2013 or whatever it was just so ambiguous? And like, does that lessen like the extent to which he's a miss, or no, it's still pretty egregious?
I mean, I can remember, I think that might have been one of the first drafts I remember. I don't know if I was like live blogging it or something, but covering it for BR. And I remember Bennett being a surprise pick, but also not to the degree of like, oh my God, like he was mocked at 10 or something, which speaks to like how rough that draft is. I mean, I'm looking at it now. Obviously Giannis at 15 would be the number 1 pick, but like other than that, I mean, McCollum is 10th.
Rudy Gobert's in there.
Oh yeah. Rudy Gobert way down 27. But I mean, it's just like Steven Adams at 12, maybe he's probably like a top 3 or 4. Yeah, that's a rough draft.
The Cavs got Kevin Love out of it though, so worked out for them.
There you go.
That's
And the
true.
Warriors kind of weirdly ended up winning the that trade just because they got the best version of Andrew Wiggins imaginable in the end from Minnesota.
That's a fair point.
Any thoughts on? Does anyone look at these picks and like, should we nominate who had the worst pick?
I mean, I think Anthony Bennett's the worst pick.
No, I meant like the biggest reach in terms of order. Anthony Bennett was drafted right where he should have been, so that is
right.
That's good value.
That's great value. You get terrific value on Bennett there. I'm trying to
Yeah,
think what
yeah.
surprised me. You know what? Honestly, your Edwards pick in the first round is the most surprising pick to me. I don't know if it should be, but I just didn't. I think I have like anti-recency bias. I think I discounted all of the really young guys and skewed more towards more established,
Which feels ironic because you don't remember what we podcast about in real
Yeah,
time.
no.
So the fact that you're waiting stuff where your memory should be worse is even like more incredible to me.
Well, all the guys I took are from back when my brain used to work. So that's my explanation.
Yeah, Dan, I feel like you've made clear you are not a fan of my D-Rose pick at number 3. So we'll tally one vote for that being the worst.
And Grant picked an ant for me, so I got one. We should
Yeah.
do the bit.
I do.
I think Ayton's the worst pick, but it's only 1 or 2 picks off, actually 2 for me. But Bogut's better. I think. Do we all agree, other than Bryan?
Yeah, I would have went with Wiggins and Bogut over Ayton. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
You know what? I think Cat falling as far as he did was pretty surprising. I think that was really good value because for like you said, Joe, it's like everybody's fixated on the playoff stuff and they'll just demeanor and all, but like Cat's had some ridiculous years.
Yeah.
And so yeah. Also, I think it was correct to take Dwight over D Rose because if you're saying, well, which I thought about, like Rose is the only MVP here. There's Dwight probably should have won MVP that year or somebody else could have. And then we're not doing this, but if you were doing 3-year peaks or even 4-year peaks, I think Howard might have to just be the number 1 pick because those 3 straight DPOYs, right? Was it 3?
Yeah.
So just if this were slightly different, I think Dwight would have had a huge shot at number 1.
I thought Zion was great value for Grant. I also kind of thought about, because I don't know how to look at it where you're weighing what happens after they get injured, but you look at last season Zion Williamson, so 22, 23. There was a point where he was just in the MVP discussion. Like he was just in that. So it was like, oh, do you take the very few games and realize you got that level of Zion? But either way, getting him, what did that end up being, Grant? The 9th pick? Was that 9th?
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. Actually 11, right? No, yeah, you're right, 9th.
It's not, yeah.
And by the way, some insight into just where I had Derrick Rose and Dwight Howard ranked. They were 8. Derrick Rose was 9 and Dwight Howard was 8 on my big board. It's like those weren't even on my radar for my first 2 picks.
Man,
Bryan was so offended he just bounced.
He's heard enough.
I'll say for me, I think Wemby was probably a surprise to go in the top 5 simply because it was that one season. But I think you kind of swayed me a little bit, Dan, with your argument, just like how good that season was and the fact that, it's probably the best rookie season since at least the merger anyway. So I ended up liking that pick, and I thought, Wiggins was good value down at 16. I really thought the back of this draft was worse than it turned out to be. Obviously, Bennett and Bargnani are rough, but Wiggins at 16, I mean, I can't erase that finals run from my mind, and that's not a bad value at 16.
I mean, that's doing all the lifting, really, because it's like a 17 points per game season during the year, and he was good, but it was like that playoff run of his is like, what's the biggest difference in history between like a player's overall perception and like how good he looked at his absolute apex? I think it's like Wiggins is in that conversation for that one specific couple months.
I will say, when you look at the names that are here, I think more of them than I would have thought. Like if I didn't go through the names and just did it off the cuff, I would have guessed that more like half of them didn't deserve to be the number 1 pick in their draft. But when you're kind of going through the first 12 or so picks, you kind of with Wiggins is where it might start to an Ayton, that of course is where it goes off the rails. But even with Cade and Banchero right now, it's just a lot of these guys deserved to be the number 1 pick relative to their draft, right?
Your team has the most guys that I think definitely should have been first, because Ant, yes, Wemby, obviously, Paolo. Well, you know where I stand on the Paolo Jalen Williams debate, but at least he's
that no one else is having aside from Grant.
I cannot be trusted on that issue. But yeah, I think we get. I don't know how far down the draft board we get where there's real questions about like who should have been number one, but it's quite a ways, right? Like there's a lot of these guys deserved it, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure you could like go back and cherry pick and like find guys in certain years that, were better than the number one pick, but like really, yeah, any of these top 12 teams should be happy with what they got. Well, actually, Ben Simmons, no, he should not be happy with what they got out of him. But other than Ben Simmons, any of the top 12, the team should be happy with what they got out of their respective players. Or, in the Pelicans case, like AD was a monster, and then they also flipped him. Like, obviously, it didn't end well for them with AD, but they turned him into this monster package that they are still reaping benefits from.
So would AD have been much lower if we were doing like 3 or even 5-year peaks, or would he have just been 2 behind Dwight?
I mean, I might have still had a number 1, honestly.
I think that's fair.
It's just tough because, like, yeah, Dwight was Defensive Player of the Year all those years, but I'm just like, I think Anthony Davis was a better player, and I don't have any stats to back it up. It's just like there's just a feeling like his peak, Anthony Davis at his best was better than Dwight Howard at his best. I
think that's right, and I think if we were building actual teams, it would even more strongly favor Davis just because of the offensive impact that he gives you. Like, Howard could score, but it was lobs and it was back downs and it was offensive rebounds and stuff. We did not include LeBron. I think who deliberately only went back 20. It's a nice round number 1, but also like I was just looking at this list and like. How if you could pick, what do we have, 20 guys, would LeBron like replace 16 of these if you just took his like top 16 seasons? Not that that's how this is set up, but like excluding LeBron was like the only way to do this, because you could just throw a dart at a LeBron season and it might warrant being number 1.
I'm upset we didn't figure out a way to work in Bronny James to this for the content.
Well, once he goes number 1 in a couple weeks, we'll do a 30-year and we'll get Bronny James in there. He'll compete with Anthony Bennett
for him at 52 or whatever it is. All right, that concludes the first ever probably redrafting of the top picks in the last 20 NBA drafts. I'm not sure that's official, but it seems like
peak season. I'm sure someone's done the redraft.
Oh yeah, like with the qualifier, it's definitely the first time that's ever happened. So hope everybody enjoyed it. Thanks again to Bryan. Thanks to Joey. Thanks to Jay. This was exciting. This was fun. Hope maybe we'll do it again. Maybe we'll do it with number 2 picks sometime down the road. We'll see. Let's really just get into the weeds. Usual closing remarks, guys. If you have not, please remember to rate, review, subscribe. Thumbs up, 5 stars, the whole deal, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube as well. Help us grow there. If you are interested in participating in not necessarily this one, but any other Hardwood Knocks podcast, give us some ideas, give us guess of players, stat padding stuff. Join our Discord. That's the best way to do it. You can find the links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that's going to cover it. Thanks again to our many special guests. And we will close, as always, with a shout to Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen, neither of whom are featured in this episode.